This is Weights and Wealth, your one-stop shop for entertaining education on building a stronger body and bank account.
We are not doctors or financial advisors and must warn you this is not medical or investing advice. It is for your entertainment.
Welcome back to Weights and Wealth. Nick and I are going to be sharing a microphone on this episode, so we might be a little close, but we're really excited. We've got an interview here today with Dylan Applegate, who Nick and I met at the gym, Big Work, that we go to. Dylan, do you have a shout out for this episode?
Yeah, I'm going to shout out my wife. She's probably listening to this one, Megan. So if you're listening, shout out to you.
Awesome. Our weights wisdom for the week is inspired by Dylan here, talking about some of his clients and working with clients. It's try putting down the tequila this weekend before you start trying a new supplement. Dylan, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I'm a strength coach here in Charleston. I have a mobile gym called The Forge. I've been doing it for 8 years. I started out at CFC as an intern with Mark Proto in their athletic department, worked as a student coach and director of operations, and then went off and ventured out my own and started training people.
Mm-hmm. When did you start training in gyms? Did you go to a big box gym before Big Work, or what did that path look like?
No, it was Big Work was first. I signed on with the Body Lab, and that was great for a while, and then it was just time to go off and do my own thing. When
did the Forge start? Did that start a couple years ago?
Right. That was actually right over a year ago. Okay. That was birthed from the pandemic. That was
nice.
I loaded all my equipment up during the pandemic into my Lexus ES and had a lowrider for about a year. And we trained people in the parking lots, and I was just like, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
So.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the evolution of that, building into the Forge and the different equipment that you have now, and what really the basics of all you need maybe to train someone in a parking lot? Because you really don't need much.
Yeah, you don't need a lot. Obviously, the more tools you have, the better, right? Like that's why I call every gym. Every gym's got its pros and cons, but at the end of the day, it's a toolbox, right? So I just made my toolbox a little bit bigger. 2 squat racks, pull-up bars, kettlebells. And you don't need much more, but it's fun to add more. So I started adding specialty bars, safety bars, stuff that, if you got an older client, they can't put a bar on their back. How do you, other than a goblet squat, which can be limiting, how do you progress that? And so you don't need a lot, but it helps to have a lot, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about progression there. I saw you training people at Big Work, and one of the things I noticed from watching you train, because I like watching other trainers train people just to see what they're doing. And one of the first things I noticed was that you do a lot of regressions from those barbell movements with a lot of like the middle-aged clients that you were working with.
Right. Yeah. Well, if you can't do the pattern right with the barbell, then you need to go down, right? You got to figure out how to get that pattern first, strengthen it, and then you can progress it.
Do you want to talk about, maybe for our audience, we do have quite a large middle-aged audience. Do you want to talk, maybe give them some ideas on some regressions for different exercises? Maybe just go through squat, bench, deadlift, some regressions for different movements.
Man, there's a lot. The easiest one for a deadlift is just elevate it, right? If you don't have the hamstring like length to get to the floor, then you don't need to be going from the floor, right? Whether that be a trap bar, whether that be elevating onto plates, just being able to get that hinge, right, it's the easiest one to go through is to elevate. Bench, you go through a push-up. Can you move your scaps well before you start blocking them onto a bench? And then squat is just figuring out how they can. That's the one that I think hinge is the hardest, but for someone who's never lifted before, a squat's equally as hard because they don't understand loading the hips, right, and loading the knees at the same time, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a little different for them.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but I'm not, I said this in the first episode we trained, I'm not certified in anything. I'm not an expert in anything, but throughout my Army career and just college and stuff, I've trained a lot of people just because I learned how to lift in high school from a good coach, and I just kind of passed that on. I don't have any certification, so nothing I say is like worth anything. But I was curious if you'd noticed this, because being in the Army, you have a lot of like runners, and they tend to struggle with squatting more so than any other lift. I know that hinge is definitely like the hardest, but for some reason back squats, just runners really, really struggle with back squats, at least in my experience. Do you see similar stuff?
Yeah, so I started off like more powerlifting, bodybuilding, and then went and got into Ironman stuff. And that was what opened my eyes into that. It's a mobility issue, right? Lots of runners, their ankle mobility is trash. Their hips are tight, and so it's getting them to bend in those and be mobile in those joints that's going to let them squat. Yeah. So really, any mobility stuff for a runner is going to be struggling or a tough ask for them initially.
That makes sense.
Which is funny because a lot of people think of mobility issues as coming with the muscle-bound, larger people.
Which you can if they don't work on mobility, but it's mostly runners.
For our runners out there, what are some go-to ankle mobility drills that you might do with someone?
You can do anything. I do it's almost like a wall reach, where it's you kind of like measure with your fingers how far away you are from a wall, and you just kind of rock into that knee, try and get that knee to come out over and try and touch the wall. You'd be surprised how many people can't really make it past their toes. You know what I mean? Like, especially runners.
Yeah.
So that's an easy one. Banded distractions as you get a little more progressive into it. But I mean, there's a lot as I've figured out.
Combat stretch, which it sounds is like similar to what you're talking about, or banded distractions are two things I've used for people with ankle mobility in the past. But yeah, ankle mobility, everything starts at the foot, right? So I guess moving along with that and how the foot can impact your lifts, do you have typically clients that have imbalances that you need to correct, and how do you kind of go through that? Do you do a lot of unilateral training with your clients at the forge since you don't have machines and stuff? Or?
Well, we don't. So I still do like mostly bipedal work to start, because single leg is progressing it, right? If you can't squat, you're not going to be able to split squat very well, right? Especially if it's mobility. But yeah, you need to do, as a runner specifically, you need to do single leg work, because most of your work is done on a single leg, right? I mean, it's not truly a plyometric, but I treat running like a very micro plyometric, right? Okay. Where it's like, it's every step you're almost jumping, but like at a very almost minute, like micro level, right? And so that causes a lot of imbalances, especially if you're not moving through joints in the right way. If you're obstructed in any way, then it's gonna chronic use injuries, or where it's just gonna keep getting worse and worse unless you start to address that. If that makes any sense.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, another thing with runners that they struggle with is IT band issues. Do you run into that a lot with clients? Do you train a lot of people that also run? Or I know you said like you do triathlons.
Yeah.
Do you get that kind of client, or is it mostly just body recomp kind of clients?
It's been shifting to that. It's been, for the most part, general population, middle-aged. But then also so many people run, right? It's like, I think it's the number one sport, if you want to call running a sport, in the world, because it's cheap and it's easy, right? It's just like you put on a pair of shoes and you run out. And so when we started doing marathons, that was the easiest form of training. You wake up 4 a.m. and you just put one foot in front of the other and go figure it out. Where it got harder with triathlons, it's like, then you had a bike, right? And you had a pool, and you need a swim. So it's like, most people's form of like workout for them is to go run. And it's when those chronic use injuries happen is when they come seek help. And that's what I found was there's such a gap in runners and endurance athletes and their cross training and strength training. And that's why they get hurt, right? They think they don't need to lift. In reality, it's what's going to let them run longer.
Yeah.
I think I saw that on your Instagram. You had a post about that.
Yeah.
That's a good one. It's a lot of people ignore that. They think they can just be these cardio athletes, and they don't realize just the bang, bang, bang on your shins and knees and all that stuff. Unless you're like trying to strengthen that through some form of strength training, it's going to lead to overuse injuries like that.
Yeah. And another thing is like, I don't think people realize the volume shifting, right? It's like you wouldn't go into a gym and be like, I'm going to load this bar up at 225 and just try and deadlift it. First time in the gym, but for some reason people want to walk out and try to run 5 miles and then run 5 miles the next day and then run 3 miles. And it's like, that's just such an astronomical jump in volume. You're going to get your plantar fasciitis. You're going to get all kinds of shin splints. It's like that's where people don't look at the volume the same way because I think it's safer.
100%. Yeah.
And it's not just volume, it's a form thing too. Most people's running form is garbage. But people inherently know when they go into the gym, oh, I need to learn how to squat. I need to have good form or I might hurt myself.
Right.
Same thing with running. If you don't have good form, you might get injured. I mean, running leads to way more injuries than lifting does.
Oh, yeah.
So
don't run. No.
that's how I look at it. I noticed that Sean was shaking in the couch over there when Dylan said that running's the most popular sport. Sean, would you like to elaborate on why you don't think running's a sport?
Well, we always at least playing high school football, you always make fun of the kids on cross country because they're all the nerds and so they have to practice running away.
I ran cross country.
Running away from a fight, so it's like you can't trust those guys because they'll always run away. That's what they've been trained to do since the very beginning. Whereas I was friends with the O-line and they'll always go straight in. So you want the O-line to have your back and not the cross country team.
I mean, it makes sense.
When did you start personally shifting into running triathlons and getting away from that powerlifting, bodybuilding kind of training?
Oh man, it was. I think it was after a New Year's, and my buddy and I were sitting on the couch. We were right out of college, and we were so hungover, and we were just we have to change. We're too old. I think we were 22 at the time. We're too old for this, and so we on that couch. We signed up for the Chicago Marathon. Okay, and you can't go too crazy with any extracurricular activities if you're running every day, right? Yeah. So, and then it just morphed into I think we really appreciated and liked the mental aspect of it. I mean, there's still the physical, just like there's physical, mental, and weightlifting, but just that even when you are run down, just not quitting, right? Can you still just keep putting one foot in front of the other and just keep going? And that became after the marathon, and we went to triathlon. And then after triathlon, our most recent one in September, I was like, all right, I need a new challenge. I need a new, what makes me have butterflies of anxiety? Am I going to be able to do this? So I signed up for a boxing event,
that's cool.
Completely different, right? So it's it was humbling. We went to tryouts and I was the hole in my game. I could run for 4 hours, but I can't, my heart rate gets to 190 and I'm spinning. You know what I mean? It was awesome.
So is that a sparring event or just when you say boxing event, does that mean an actual tournament?
So
you're fighting people?
It's a charity event. They sell out TD Arena, which is where the College of Charleston plays. I think it's 6,000 people. And you just go in and two amateur fighters. Two amateur fighters that don't really know what they're doing, just flail.
That's
3 rounds
cool.
and try and knock each other's heads off.
Yeah, I went to Notre Dame and we have a huge amateur boxing program there. Okay. I tried to do it my senior year, and the doctor wouldn't let me do it because I've had too many concussions.
Okay.
Yeah, he was me and him had kind of become friends over my years in school, and I'd come see him 3 times because I played in the Intramural football. It's Notre Dame has the only 11-on-11 full pads football league for just for fun. And so me and all my buddies in college, we would play that, and you just go out on Sundays. Everybody's hungover as hell, and you at the bar the night before, you're oh, we're playing Dunn, another dorm, and so you go find their quarterback and buy him a round of shots. It was fun stuff like that. But yeah, you get bell rung a couple times, and I did, and so I went in my senior year, and he was like, dude, this is the only sport where you're intentionally trying to give the other person a concussion. Ethically, I cannot sign off on this, but it's great training. And it's super cool. It's super duper cool. I really wish I did it. Yeah. Regardless of the TBI issues.
Well, yeah, man. So, I'm from Kentucky. Muhammad Ali is a legend there. I've always wanted to learn, but I never wanted to pay for coaching, if that makes any sense. Yeah. And so it's it's free.
Yeah, might as well.
I have great coaches at Ethos, and they're teaching me everything I need to know and humbling me every day.
That's super cool.
Speaking of paying for coaching, you want to get into maybe sales with personal training for other personal trainers? I know a lot of personal trainers really struggle with sales, but obviously you've moved into an independent kind of personal training business. So you must have had some success with learning sales skills and having financial success as a trainer?
Yeah, I think it's what every trainer doesn't want to hear. It's a grind. It's word of mouth, honestly, is your most reliable sales tactic, if that makes any. It's just, I will say going independently, and then I've pivoted to be more like online, having to learn the marketing, having to learn search engine optimization, having to learn all this marketing stuff that I really never thought about. But, I'd say the biggest challenge I'm facing right now is pivoting from in person, where it's like, I just know if I get you in the door, I'm going to blow you away with value, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to see the value. I won't, if you're injured, I'm not going to, that's outside my scope. But if I can alleviate pain, then, you have a very loyal customer base, really loyal client. Online's different. It's a little more anonymous. It's a little more of a numbers game. You help more people, but it's also the attrition rate is so much higher because I'm not seeing these people 2 hours a week, sometimes more than their friends, more than my friends. Mm-hmm. It's, a 30-minute phone call here, a 30-minute phone call there, texting a lot, but it's just, there's not as much of a personal touch to it, if that makes any sense.
Do you prefer in-person training to online then?
I prefer both. Each has they have their pros and their cons. When I was really successful with the one-on-ones, the quality of life wasn't great, right? You wake up super early before everybody else. Your free time is when everyone else is working, right? And then you go back to work, and then everyone else gets off work, and it's like, and then you get a wife, and she gets off work, and she wants to go do something, but you're like, oh, I'm working till 8, right? So things start to close down. Next thing you know, it's just go to bed, wake back up. So it was just time for a change of, I like the Forge, and I like the fact that I can now have classes, right? And still teach the basics, teach the fundamentals, teach not as personal. So it's like, some things slip through the cracks, but you get the cost of, the barrier of entry is lower, so more people can do it. So that's, from a community aspect, very nice. But then also, my quality of life's better with the online. I can go travel, have my computer, and still help people, still have a job, basically, right? That makes sense. So it's like, whereas when people are dependent on you in one-on-ones, and you go on a vacation, and they're just all, you can give them work, but are they going to do it? It's like, it's tough for them. And so you have a responsibility to them as well as you're paying clients, right?
One of the things that we've talked about before on the show is how to find a good personal trainer, because it's one of those things where anyone can get a certification. There's different levels of trainers out there, right? So one of the things that we've said before on the show about maybe like green flags for a personal trainer is, especially on the online space, have they trained people in person before?
Right.
Because that's kind of like a building block to being able to train people online. If someone hasn't trained people in person before and trained a lot of people and understood by talking with these people all the time where people fall off and how their nutrition works, online is a completely different beast. And I feel like you're missing a lot if you haven't done it in person before. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I'd also say that, like you said, online is just a completely different animal from a training aspect too. Like, as trying to communicate, it's like herding cats. Right? It's like they might respond in a day, they might respond in 2 days. It's like, so I've tried to switch it up. When you sign up, I send you like an expectations list, right? And it's like, I have high expectations. You're going to send your videos for check-ins at these times, and we'll go over them in your check-in meeting. But then also, like, I'm going to respond to you within this amount of time period. I expect the same. And I get there's, things happen, whatever. But it's, for the most part, it's like trying to maintain the expectation of, you're paying me to do this for you. So let's hold each other accountable, and let's do it the right way. And do it the right way with high expectations from both ends.
Yeah, that was kind of one of my questions, is like, how do you set yourself apart? Like, what like is something in such a saturated market that like a personal trainer can do to be like, hey, like, essentially pick me, like I am the one,
right?
And I think you kind of hit on some of it, but it's an interesting topic.
Well, that's my biggest pet peeve with the whole training industry is the barrier of entry is so low.
Yeah.
Right. So you get so many
100%
snake oil salesmen, I'll call them. your Dr. Joel Seedman's out there. You know what I mean? He's a little different in the fact that he's a PhD, but it's just my biggest red flag for any person looking for a personal trainer is if they give you like, this is how you do it. This is the end all be all way. I'm selling you on this. It's like, if their response to you isn't, well, it depends.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
It depends.
It depends on what your goals are. It depends on this. It depends on that. There's a lot of variables, and it's not just if you eat cereal for breakfast, you're going to get cancer. You need to stop doing that. You know what I mean? It's like you see those tweets all the time. You're like, what is this?
Which like that's what people want. They just want like a cut and dry answer most of the time.
And that's why they're popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They want that.
Like the magic bullet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The carnivore
like this
diet.
causes that. Yeah.
The Liver King, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
They want something. They just want to be told, like, don't do this, and it'll all be okay. Yeah. And it's not that simple.
Yeah, but even like aside from stuff like nutrition, even like form sometimes, like on a back squat, it's different. Like someone with legs like Ted is going to squat differently than me. So like you can't, like I squat like almost ass to grass every time. And someone that's like 6'6" that's just not really feasible,
Yeah, and it also depends on like femur length. It depends on so much different. That's one of the biggest things that's been interesting moving from online to personal is like it reminds me of a lab, like a chemistry lab or a physics lab, where it's when you're writing out programs and you're writing out instructions. It's like trying to write out a lab, and it's like you just have to assume that they know absolutely nothing. Yeah. Like they don't even know to pick up the beaker. You know what I mean?
I've never heard this before. This is such an amazing analogy because when you go through labs in school, they tell you have to write out the methodology for the experiment so that someone who's never touched the stuff before can do exactly that.
Exactly, right? And it's like, well, and like I always used to get in trouble in lab because like, well, what you assume that you put a beaker on the flame, not just put the chemical right into the flame, but it's like, you know what I mean? But it's like, no, like you just have to assume that they know absolutely nothing. And that's your starting point. And then, eventually as you get to know the people, there's rapport, they know things, but you just have to assume from starting block that they know absolutely zero. And you're going to walk them step by step through everything.
So with that instruction and your online training business, do you have videos for every exercise? And how do you do your online business? Do you use an app? Do you do Google Sheets?
Yeah, so I use True Coach.
Okay.
And then as I keep going, like, I try in every workout I do, I try and video a new exercise like every day. So you just keep building that video library. If I don't have the video, I'll find the video and put it up there. But then on top of that, it's, typing out specific instructions on if it's their first time doing it, on a lift, on like what to expect, your reps in reserve, like what are those, like that kind of stuff, right? Like how do you explain everything and not overwhelm them?
Yeah. With my virtual client, because I still keep part-time, a couple clients, 2 to 3 to 4, depending. But generally with my online clients, my calls with them at the beginning are super long. Might be like an hour each time. And when I have people sign up for training, I don't give a specific time that each call is going to take because sometimes it's longer. And then like I've got a client that's been with me for a couple of years now. Sometimes it's a 10-minute phone call and we get done. We need to get done and move on. And sometimes it's longer, but I forget exactly where I was going with this, but like I guess as you're with a client longer, you don't need to talk about specifics as much.
It's a relationship.
In the beginning, it's so crucial.
Yeah. So you kind of like build an understanding. It's a relationship. I know what you know, and then like you can kind of like talk shop. If that makes sense. It's more at the end of the day, you're a teacher, right? So you're trying to teach them everything they need to know to be pretty much self-sustaining. But and then at a certain point, I have levels of online coaching, and at a certain point, you're going to get downgraded to like you're on your own for the most part. I'm here as like a guide, right? Okay. If you have questions, come to me. But for the most part, I'm still writing your program. You know what you're doing, right? And if most people get to that point, I I would say the difference is in person. It's a lot more of, I'm going to check this off my to-do list today. You know, a Mount Pleasant mom or something like that, and go back on my way. And they don't apply themselves, if that makes sense. Online coaching, I've found so far, people are applying themselves a lot more.
Yeah. As far as you talked earlier about blowing people's minds with the in-person to get them, like Sean was asking, how do you differentiate yourself? When I was in a big box gym, we could give people free sessions. Like when I worked at Gold's or other gyms, give people a free session and then try to get them to sign on with you. One of the things I would do, we talked about mobility earlier, I would do like a movement assessment with them and see what wasn't moving, and then I'd give them some mobility exercises, and in 10 minutes I'd have them squatting when they couldn't squat or something like that. And I'd blow their mind and show them it's not just I'm writing down these exercises for you. Like, there's so much more that I can help you with so that you're moving pain-free. What are some things that you've done throughout your career or now at the Forge to kind of try to blow people's minds so that you do get your teeth into them?
Yeah, I know. It sounds almost predatory. It's no, but yeah, it's you have to demonstrate value, however that might be. And I think it just depends so much on what the client's looking for. You know, if their back is bothering them, if their knees are bothering them, then it's how, you know, first, are you injured? And if you're injured, I'll refer you to a PT doctor. I'm not going to deal with, you know, whatever that might be. If it's not like if it's not an injury, how can I alleviate that and have you move? And you know, sometimes it takes a while, but it's how do I get you to move where it's not painful? Or it's, you know, sometimes people come in, I know this form, and then it's changing their form and then being like, how much more stable does that feel? Right? It's stability stuff too. And then some people, they just like to have someone to talk to. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's just being personal. That's part of being a coach, right? It's just the psychology of it and actually like talking to a human and like getting them that way.
100%. I think that the amount of information that's available online from snake oil salesmen, from really good, you know, trainers that have pages, like going through Ted's Lift Help or Imperial Fitness, you know, there's like 3,000 posts. Like, I can't read all that, you know, so getting that face-to-face time, at least for like probably that first initial meeting, is really good to just kind of prep them and like make them feel like they can understand it and make it feel like an issue that is surmountable rather than some sort of impossible obstacle that they simply don't have the time to understand what a macronutrient is, you know? So.
Yeah, I get that. I would just say, you know, you were talking about doing free sessions. I tend to try and stay away from that because if you give something for free, it's tough to get them to pay for it, right? Yeah. But then, you know, at the same time, money is money, and people. So money is their buy-in at a certain point, right? It's like if they cancel, it's what hurts. It's, you know, it's that kicking the butt to keep going, or, you know, like whatever it might be. But that's, for the most part, unless you're just rolling in it, that's your buy-in. That's your, you know, problem. If you cancel last minute, bang, you know, it's like, I just lost, you know, I just lost so much money. So I try and say, like, I try and talk to them, and it's like, you know, on the onboarding, I ask them what they do, you know, kind of stuff like that. And then it's more of a, like, you know, what would hurt? You know what I mean? Like, let's get you in, but then like, what would hurt? You know, if you were to, let's say, waste it and then go from there.
What does your intake look like? Because the more questions you ask, the more information you have to help that person better.
It's a long one.
Yeah.
It's like every time I do one, I think of a new question, right? So, I mean, I think it's about 30 questions at this point, but it goes from everything from, you know, training history through, you know, surgery history, injury history, through what do you do, you know, like how strenuous is your job, you know, how stressful is your life, you know, how many you have kids, well, because at the end of the day, as a coach, you're a stress manager, right? And stress is fluid. I think so many coaches look at stress as, when you're with me, this is the stress, but stress is like a wave, right? And at the peaks, it's high stress. At the valleys, it's still stress. It's just low stress. So it's trying to determine where somebody is on the stress continuum. And then, so it's like if someone has, you know, a newborn, and they're not sleeping well, then I'm probably not going to kick them down further down that hole, unless it's kind of like what they need, unless they're a competition, that kind of thing, then it changes. But gen pop, you know what I'm saying? So it's, I don't know where I was going too much with that, but it was just kind of,
No, we talked about stress a lot on the show, and we were looking at some studies once that showed that like testosterone changes how you perceive stress. So if your testosterone's higher, you get less stressed from things, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of guys won't get as stressed out by things as girls will. Like
Interesting.
with wives, I think we understand that, right? But yeah, I think your point about coaches being stress managers for their clients is a very real thing. Do you, when you train people online, do you have them check off boxes for anti-stress activities? Like one of my things, if I do have a client that is overstressed, I might put in part of their daily check-in, like meditating or going on a walk and getting sunlight.
I don't, but that's a good idea. I'm probably gonna steal that. But no, I do have a readiness thing where it's like, try and fill out how you feeling today, and then how I can then kind of look at how did that affect your lift that day. So, or your workout, whatever it might be that you're doing. Because, did you sleep last night? No. Well, that's probably why you're sagging on your numbers a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. What's your favorite avatar or type of client to train? I know you said you train a lot of Gen Pop.
I like Gen Pop, but athletes, whether they be endurance athletes, high school football players, baseball players. The reason I like athletes is just because there's a consequence, if that makes sense, right? I would even consider bodybuilding their athletes. If you're signed up for a competition, it's just there's a consequence. If you don't, it kind of automatically raises that expectation, like I was saying earlier, where it's, if you don't do this, if you skip that last rep, if you do this, well, then how's that going to hit your performance later, kind of thing. And then they're just a lot more motivated.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a high school athlete wanting to go to the next level. It's going to give you a lot more buy-in than, a 40-year-old dude just looking to lose a few pounds, right?
Yeah. Speaking of like competitions and stuff like that, with the long-term plan, like with the Forge, like, do you have any desire to start like a team type thing, kind of like not like West Side Barbell? You said you had like a background in strength, but like, would getting back into like that kind of competitive scene ever interest you?
No, I don't think so. I prefer more like the team stuff is so difficult. There's such a different dynamic, especially if you're going schools, stuff like that. Yeah. Then you're dealing with athletic directors, you're dealing with, whatever it might be. And then also the pay is just for whatever. It's kind of like how we don't pay our teachers. It's like, unless you're at Alabama, you know what I'm saying? You're
college strength coaches are like the interns.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, it's ridiculous what they get paid, like ridiculously low. Unless, like I said, you're at a Power 5, you're the head guy at like Alabama, Arkansas, something like that, and then you're making six figures. But, so many of these guys like App State and stuff like that, it's crazy.
Yeah, I've heard it's a brutal life. We have Army has this whole new program where they've been hiring a lot of like personal trainers and strength coaches and PTs and stuff. And I've talked to these guys just because I find them interesting. Like, I'm kind of the liaison for my unit with them because they're all civilians. And I'm like, why become an Army contractor? Like, why work for the DOD of all organizations? Nothing against them, but it's just like, it's an interesting choice. It's like and they're like, well, the quality of life is like 10 times better because it's like a 6 to 3 o'clock job rather than like being a strength coach for the football team. You're at practice, you are at the afternoon lift, you are traveling with the team, like, and you're getting paid probably less money than the Army's giving you. Like,
it's for sure. Yeah.
It's wild. Like, I had no idea that like strength and conditioning were like, I always thought it would just be like the physical therapy guy, some sort of doctor and stuff like that would go on the road with the team. Cause it's like, you're not going to go hit, legs before the game. Like that just seems silly. But I mean, I guess they do go with the team.
And a lot of it also they run like, well, I guess it depends on the school. Athletic trainers run a lot of warm ups and stuff, but
Okay.
they'll run you through the warm ups, the drills, stuff like that, just to get you warmed up. Yeah, it's just crazy because honestly, college strength coaches are probably some of the most qualified individuals, and they get paid the least. Meanwhile, you have someone who went online and got a 24-hour, certification, and they're making a lot more, and it's just like, how does this make sense, right? Same way we're paying Shohei Ohtani $700 million, and it's like a teacher's making $30K. It's crazy.
With increased qualifications and all that, what certifications have you gone through, and what do you do for continuing education?
So continuing education is awesome. I have my NSCA, CSCS, FMS, and the precision nutrition.
Okay.
I don't really see the need. I'm getting a master's right now. That's what my main continuing education is. But for the most part, the alphabet soup, no one's ever asked, what's your qualifications, right? It's more like show it, right? Yeah. So it's like you can get all the certifications in the world, but if you're not applying it and you're not actually learning it, you're just checking off another certification, then it's not worth it.
I'd way rather have, if I was opening a gym, hiring trainers, I'd way rather hire Sean, who loves talking to people and has trained a bunch of soldiers and other friends in college, than someone who's a kines major and got a certification but has never trained anyone before. Like the experience. I think personal training is one of those things where experience is just so valuable.
I agree to a point. I think, and that's where it gets into like the low barrier of entry. It's like, the guy who knows how to coach somebody is valuable, but are they teaching them the right things?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's like you have to have that balance of, I know what I'm talking about. And I think for me personally, it took a long time not to have imposter syndrome. You know what I mean? It's like you go through school and you're like, there's so much more I don't know. And that's what continuing education is for.
Yeah.
Right. But if you don't have that feeling of I need to learn more, then that's also, like we were talking about earlier, a red flag in a coach. Like a coach just sits there on his qualification, doesn't read anything, doesn't continue learning, because the field we work in is so new, honestly. If you look at like the spectrum of how long these things have been around, and there's so much emerging science that what I learned in, college can now, most of it's true, but can now be, there's new research articles that say different kind of thing.
Right? For years, the science showed you couldn't put your knees past your toes on a squat,
terrible,
right? And then study comes out and we find out that's completely bogus and not true, right? So it definitely does.
It depends, right?
Well,
it depends on the person.
I'm curious. I'm forgetting the name of this movie, but it's Mark Wahlberg and some other guy.
Pain and Gain. One of the greatest movies ever.
I'm imagining like the interview process for Ted's gym being like, "What's your bench?" But I am curious. Like, how much do you think? Like you said, like it doesn't matter how much you know, but like show it. Or like what your qualifications are, but like show it. Like, how much do you think that affects like the quality of a personal trainer? Like, if this guy has all, the brain gains in the world, but can't squat 315, like, do you think that would, like, how much do you think that like really weighs in? Like the guy who hasn't put the work in essentially, but has all these.
Well, then it depends.
Letters.
Two different things. When I was at CFC, the head strength coach was a former track guy, and he was rail thin, but for his, relative weight, he was really strong, right? Just because you can't squat 315 or bench 315 doesn't mean you don't know how to get someone else there. Right? Yeah. There's that kind of that funny saying of like those who can do coach.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I'm saying? So it's like sometimes those who can do still coach, but just because you can't, do it yourself doesn't mean you can't lead other people there. True. And I think that comes back to social proof of like clients, right? It's like, I might not be able to like bench 315, but I got this guy up to a 400-pound bench, right? So it's like,
I think it matters more for sales, especially in the online space. If you go into a gym, obviously, like your first impression of what the trainer looks like might impact.
Oh yeah,
like buying a training package, right? But once you're working with someone, if you realize that they have the knowledge and they know application of that knowledge, then I don't really think it matters as much. I've at LA Fitness that I worked at, there was a coach that didn't really even look like he worked out, but he was really successful with his clients, especially with the elderly clients that he worked with helping them gain strength and improve their range of motion. So yeah, I think it depends.
Yeah, and I think the elderly thing right there is a great example of, you know, the brain gains matter more than like what you can do, right? Because like I'm not gonna go have a 70-year-old person try and do the same workout, you know, as a 40-year-old. It just doesn't make. But I've seen people run elderly people through a workout that is way too advanced for what they should be doing, just because they don't differentiate the population, right? They just take what they learned in that 24-hour certification or whatever they took, and they just apply it to everything.
Yeah.
I think so much of that application differentiated across different populations comes from experience.
Yeah.
Like when I was at LA Fitness, for whatever reason, we had a lot of elderly clients. I don't really know why, but that's my favorite population to work with just because of how much you can improve their quality of life. But from like the first older client I worked with to the 5th to the 10th, I became such a better trainer at working with that population just because application and experience of applying different principles to drastically different people.
Yeah. And I actually really do like working with elderly also, like you said, because improving longevity, right? And like improving their quality of life makes a very loyal client, but also they're fun to like banter with because their give a shit level is real low at that point. Like, they'll just tell you exactly, like, you'll be like, hey, we got squats. No. It's like, no, we have squats. And they're like, no, we're going to do this today. You're like, all right.
That's funny.
For continuing education, have you ever heard of Prescript or NCI?
I have not, no.
So those are two of the companies that I go through. One's more biomechanics, lifting side. One's more nutrition side. But you were talking earlier about essentially the Dunning-Kruger effect. The more you learn, the more you know you don't know.
Yeah.
And with both of those, like I did the level 1 certifications and then realized there was a lot more to learn and started doing more certifications through each of them. And through that, you start to do a bunch of different certs. In the fitness industry, there's this coaching coaches space that has absolutely just exploded.
It's every other ad. I can't stand it.
And a lot of times the coaches that are coaching other coaches weren't very successful themselves.
Yeah.
And they're successful at coaching other coaches financially, maybe.
Yeah.
So since this is a podcast with personal trainers here, maybe there's other trainers listening to this podcast. Do you have any recommendations for them on how to identify good continuing education versus bad continuing education?
Peer-reviewed articles are a big one, right? Like, what is your sample size, your N number? But more than anything, it's you know, I go through NSCA because so much of that strength journal is gold. Yeah. You know, it would just be. It's tough to differentiate these days, honestly. Yeah. You know, I like Brookbush, like Bookbrush, I think is what it is. Institute.
Okay.
I like anything that Gray Cook did, you know, any FMS stuff, continuing that way. But at the end of the day, I like reading. I'm a nerd. I like reading research articles.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, I would say make sure it's meta-analysis, not just, you know, some dude.
Gold standard.
Yeah. Not some dude who just, you know, I had 5 people do this study and this is what I found. And you're like, oh, I hope that works for my client. Like, no, it's meta-analysis. And then, you know, lots of the NCAA or NCSA is, you know, you have a quiz afterwards and you try and apply what you learn. And then a lot of it also is just, when I read a article and it's a good one, I try and take what can I take for myself, right? How does this apply to me? Obviously, all of it's good information, but sometimes I'm never going to use it, right? I might never use this on a client, but how can I take what I did learn and then apply it for a client maybe that next day, right? Like, that's how I look at it.
Yeah. With I feel like meta-analyses for nutrition is different than biomechanics.
Yeah.
A lot of science that comes out with nutrition, I think, is not even worth really looking at a lot of the time. So if you look at like survey studies on what people eat, and they're recalling what they ate, and they're not taking out any of the compounding variables, sometimes the conclusions that are drawn are just not really valuable at all. But we looked at a study earlier today. We were doing an episode 57, so a couple before when this one will go up. But we're looking at a recent study that came out about a week and a half ago, where one group got 0 grams of protein post-workout, one got 25 grams post-workout, and one got 100 grams post-workout. And the group that got 100 grams had highly elevated levels of muscle protein synthesis and plasma levels of amino acids, including leucine, for over 12 hours. So at the end of that breakdown of that study, we mentioned how with muscle protein synthesis, doesn't matter if the switch is just turned on or how much the switch is, if it's a bigger switch, right? Yeah. So, and we went over with like hypertrophy, like, we don't really know. So is this study valuable? Like, what can we take away that's valuable versus what is just us reading studies because we like reading studies, right? So I think like when you were talking about how when you read a study, you try to take an application to your clients or yourself. I feel like that's a really good way to do it. Whenever you're reading through studies or meta-analyses, looking at like what's the takeaway and what is this study saying that might not actually affect people, even though it's making a claim. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. The other thing I'd look at on those nutrition studies is who backs them.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be surprised how many articles are sponsored by Coca-Cola or something like that, right? And it's like, sugar's good. You know, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
We're making a huge joke about Big Whey when we were doing that. So.
Yeah, it's, you know, you always, and for the most part, you can read that in the conflict of interest tab on their article, but sometimes they're sneaky.
Don't just read the abstract.
Yeah, but you have like a shell company that is sponsored by the Coke Foundation.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, okay, well, it might not be directly Coca-Cola saying that, you know, sugar's good, but it's people that are funded by them. Yeah. So they know where their, you know, apples fall from.
Big soda.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like that's how we got the low-fat diet, I think. Yep. And then also the eggs are really bad for you, the cholesterol and all that.
Well, and then you always have it on like the local news, and it's like, and they don't care what the number was. Like, yo, tomatoes give you cancer. Not anymore. No, they do. Not anymore. No, they do. You know, it's like.
But you can't blame people for being confused about nutrition when that is what happens. You'll see an article and the headline will be, eating over 2 eggs a day will make you die 10 years earlier and increases chance of heart attack by 40%.
Yeah.
And then you read another article that says, oh, eggs are a superfood and there's almost nothing else you can eat that will give you more dense serving of micronutrients. Right. So what is one of the ways that you, maybe with your Gen Pop clients, since maybe some of the people listening are Gen Pop and they don't have a trainer they work with, what are some of the, I mean, it depends, but what are some of the things that you first go over with people when you talk about nutrition to new clients?
You know, I go over like the basic, you know, percentages of what your diet should be. I mean, again, it depends on their goal. Like, you know, what percentage of protein in your diet is protein, fats, and carbs. But also, I kind of just tell them, don't overthink it, right? It's portion control, it's moderation, especially if you're trying to lose weight. And then it's kind of like the definition of porn, you know when you see it. Right, you know good food when you see it. Yeah. I mean, obviously, sometimes it can get tricky with processed foods, but that's when I just say go for whole foods, right? That's generally, I used to try and be a lot more on top of it, and again, it was just like trying to herd cats, you know. And then it's like someone's not meeting their weight goal, but then you look on their Instagram story and they're, you know, downing a half bottle of cream cheese. And, it's like at 3 a.m. after a night out or something. You're like, might have something to do with it. Yeah. But yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like it's gotta matter to them. So I advise, I give, you know, if I find a good recipe, I'll give a recipe for them that might fall into their goals, but I don't try and have them go crazy with like, all the supplements and
all
all
this. Do you do a lot of nutrition work with your online clients, or is it more programming that you generally do?
It's more programming, and then like, form checks, and if their goal is weight loss, then, I'll be a little more on top of it.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah. But no, I would say I don't really use my precision nutrition certification all that often, just because at the end of the day, it's got to matter to you. And the gut is way stronger than the brain sometimes, and they'll find a way to do whatever they want. Yeah. You can try to hold them accountable, but
it is amazing though. Like so many people don't realize what goes into nutrition, how much of an effect that has. Like first time that I took it seriously, like I was really strong at the end of college, and like really fast. Like I could run a sub 13 2-mile and was, around 1,300 pounds total on the big three. Like I was in good shape, but I didn't look like it. And I finally took nutrition seriously, other than just being like counting calories. Like I actually got down and dialed in my macros, and it makes such a big result. And I think a lot of people forget that, like, about liquid calories, especially if you're trying to do a cut, and they think like, oh, it's got 0 sugar, so it's still like I'm still going to lose weight if I have this Coke Zero. It's not that simple. So it's incredible. Like I had a huge gap of knowledge there, and once you get those filled, you're like, oh my gosh, you feel like you were wandering in the desert for 40 years.
Yeah, the easiest fix for most people is just increase your protein.
Yeah,
you don't realize how many people are just not eating enough protein.
That's incredible.
Don't fill up on bread. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's for real.
What are some of the ways that you get people to increase protein? We did an episode with a female personal trainer that we know from college, and discussed like specifically for females, they drastically undereat protein a lot of times. But what are some of the ways that you suggest people increase protein, and are there any populations such as females or elderly people that struggle more than other populations?
You mean like outside of like just supplementation of like
outside of just go have a protein shake after workout? Like, are there any other things that you tell people?
If they're not, depending on their dietary restrictions and stuff, if they're not eating enough meat, up that meat.
We're a big meat podcast. Yeah,
sure. Big meat podcast. No, but I mean, it's people don't buy it oftentimes because it's an expense, right? And I think that's where a lot of the problems arise, is that 12 ounces of chicken's a lot more than people realize, or whatever it might be. But yeah, I just try and up their meat intake, whether it be whatever they like, but then they just gotta track it. And oftentimes, like I think we said this earlier at some point, once you start tracking it, you start to realize it, and then it's a lot easier to up it.
It depends on the client, but if I have a nutrition client, there's different things I'll do with them, because you got to meet people where they're at, like we said earlier. So, but if someone has started to pay attention to what they're eating, but they've never tracked macros before, sometimes I'll start with introducing tracking macros, because it builds so much awareness into, I ate this 400 calorie meal and it only had 6 grams of protein in it. It was all these carbs and fat. I didn't even know that.
Right.
Just tracking macros for a week, people start to realize, I was only at 10 grams of protein before lunch and wasn't able to hit my protein. And then they build the awareness, okay, maybe I need to target protein in the morning to help me reach those levels. So the awareness that tracking macros builds, it's such an easy just baseline track for 2 weeks, and you don't have to track forever, but at least you start to learn what foods have protein in them, how much.
Yeah, the only problem I've ever found with tracking macros is sometimes people just go crazy with it. You know what I'm saying? And then it's like all they think about. It's like, oh my God, I didn't get 6 grams of protein tonight. It's like it actually like causes distress.
Yeah,
like, dude,
it does. It definitely does.
Okay.
I mean, like, it kind of makes me eat less, because then I don't want to like figure out the exact portions in what I'm eating. So then I just end up not eating something because I have to track it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I stopped.
Yeah.
I don't recommend this. It's kind of like the dirty cut, but I will track. I know exactly what I need for a day, right? And you just put it all into a bowl. And like you eat it throughout the day, and when that bowl is gone, that's it for the day. It's like the dirty cut, you know what I mean? Like,
I have a soldier that does that. He calls it snake meal.
Snake meal. I mean, like it's terrible. I mean, it's awful. But like for this boxing event, they want me down to like, I think it's a 215. I'm 240 right now. So it's like, sometimes you just gotta up the protein and then just bear down and.
Do you have an example of what goes into this meal? Is it,
Oh my God, ground turkey, frozen vegetables, just basically anything that gets you into the range I need to be in.
Yeah.
It's
Sounds awful. Like, how many times do you have to microwave that?
oftentimes I just don't anymore. It's honestly better cold than it gets all dried out.
Yeah.
So we were talking about this at my house the other morning with everyone that was there for Christmas, because I just went over to the refrigerator in the morning and took out the leftover lamb and was just eating cold lamb.
Yeah.
Because hey, I need protein. It's the morning. I'm hungry. Like, I'm not going to take time if we're all sitting down somewhere together. So I think there's a big difference in some people with how much they care about their food being fresh and heated up. Do you ever run into clients that refuse to have leftovers, and you find that they have more of a challenge with nutrition?
She's not a client, but she's my wife.
Same.
Yeah, I can eat the same thing every single day for the next 2 months. And I swear to God, she can't eat the same thing twice in a day. It's like, so that challenges me a little bit. But some people are foodies. Some people really like, they get pleasure from their food. Yeah. And I get that. But then it's just, you have to find a way to portion it, and then don't cook 4 servings. Right. Yeah. And then don't eat all of it.
Yeah. My wife's the same way. Like, I don't think we've been married 5 months. We haven't had the same dinner like one time. And I will make, my meal prep. Like, the only thing I care about is that it's hot. Like, if I'm going to have a bowl of ground beef and potatoes, or baked beans and chicken, or like whatever I decide for that week, it's just got to be hot. That's all I ask. It's pretty low maintenance. But she's like, oh, we had pork chops with, that kind of sauce like 3 weeks ago. Like, you really want to eat that again? And like, it was good. Yeah. Like, you're a great cook. Like, just like, please make it again.
I mean, I'll eat it if I hate it. Like, we got like the Costco pork loin, and it was like a big, and by the end of it, I was like, I hate this. I don't ever want to see this again. But then I just kept eating it because I knew what I needed, and I knew just got to get it done, right?
Yeah.
I've been eating almost the same exact breakfast every day for about 5 years.
Why not, right?
It just goes down.
Yeah. You know what's in it.
Protein, we're good.
You know what's in it.
But I've definitely noticed a difference with male and female clients where, especially if I'm really upping the protein, you do wind up going into like, these are the meals. Mm-hmm. So I never really ran an issue with some of the guys, especially like younger guys in college or right out of college. But then some of my female clients, I realized, oh, okay, I got to up my game. I need to help them find recipes and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's just levels to it. Like you were talking about earlier, some level of client you can just kind of coast with, and others you got to up your game.
Yeah. So I've been working on it for a while, but I'm going to start doing like a cookbook when you when you sign on, it's just 33 recipes, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it's like, how long can you go without getting sick of all of it? There's 11 of each. So mix and match how you want.
Yeah.
That's nice. And you're going to have like the macros and breakdown of that?
It's already got all of it in there. So.
That's sweet. I might become a client.
What do you like to do outside of training? Because I think with a lot of people that are interested in fitness and health, sometimes we have a lot of the same hobbies, just healthy lifestyle kind of.
So outside of training, you mean?
Yeah.
That's like my whole life. Love sports.
Yeah.
Season ticket holder for CFC basketball, so always at basketball games. Just watching sports. Yeah. And then like marveling at the athleticism that's on the field. Mm-hmm.
Did you play college sports or
for like half a semester?
Half a semester?
No, it was really bad. So
what sport?
Baseball.
Nice.
That's how I got involved with working with the baseball team at the College of Charleston. And
that's cool. Yeah.
Was baseball the only sport you were coaching or doing the strength coaching for?
Basically when the baseball team was in there, I was working with whoever either Proto or Alec who was working on the program, and I was in there.
I've never done like sports training because I'm not an athlete. I'm extremely uncoordinated, as they can tell you. So I'm not in that. I've always just done Gen Pop, really. But the the whole performance and sport side of things is just so much to learn there. I find it really interesting.
Oh yeah.
But it's completely different animal. And for anyone looking for a trainer, there's definitely like a big difference in a more performance-based person or a more just kind of general lifestyle body kind of coach.
And the best part is the performance-based training is so applicable to Gen Pop, right? It's like the same standards and same methods that you would use, like let's say velocity-based training, you can use for Gen Pop too.
Yeah.
And it just dials in like their percentages and everything just a little bit more. So I use both.
When you work with Gen Pop, a lot of times when I get a client, the only thing they've ever the only variable they've ever really messed with is increasing weight on something. And then a lot of times it's really easy to just switch rep ranges and they notice an explosion of gains. But like switching rep ranges is a really easy one to change aside from changing the weight. Tempo is an easy one, but what are some variables that you like to change for people to help them keep progressing?
Stability.
Stability
is a big one. If you can change someone's, like you said, a unilateral or however you want to do it, but stability is a easy one to change. I mean, like you said, all the other ones are easy too, but getting someone onto one leg or just on an unstable platform is a big help.
Do you find like a huge difference after working with a baseball team versus like training like a high school football player or track athlete? Like, is there like a massive amount of difference between, like he said, Gen Pop and college athletes? Like, is there a large difference between how you would train the different sports, or is it kind of general principles?
I wouldn't call it large. The general principles are the same, right? It's power development, it's strength, and it's that's kind of like the crux of your performance. But then also your sport specific movement is going to change, right? Yeah. Like baseball is just a lot more rotational, so you're going to do a lot more rotational power, anti-rotation. I mean, football for the most part, unless you're a wide receiver who's cutting, it's linear. Yeah, you're going straight ahead. I mean, especially as a lineman who's trying to be strong. I mean, yeah, you gotta have lateral movement, but that push, everything, it's pretty linear.
Mm-hmm. All right. Nice.
You guys have any more questions?
No, I feel like that's filled me in on a lot.
Yeah, I feel like it's really helpful for our audience with a bunch of different topics. So,
well, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, no, that was wonderful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fun.
All right. If you want to find Dylan on social media, on Instagram, it's imperial_fitness_SC. And then his training business, The Forge, is theforge_SC. Is there anywhere else that people should look to find you?
This week, the website will be relaunched. So that's just imperial.fitness.
Okay.
And we're doing a bunch of memberships with The Forge. So.
And then we do have a relatively large Charleston audience in terms of percentage of our, maybe 10% of our audience is from Charleston. Okay. So are you accepting new clients right now if someone really liked what they heard today?
Yeah, absolutely. Always accepting new clients. And then if you're not into the online stuff, we do memberships with The Forge where it's, sign up for a certain tier and you get a certain amount of classes, and the highest tier is unlimited. And then,
awesome.
Always accepting.
Nice. Well, if you're a listener and you want to learn more about training with Dylan, just reach out to him.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us today at Weights and Wealth. And don't forget to apply today's lessons to live healthy and wealthy.
If this conversation will contribute to your fitness and financial gains, please share it with a friend or family member and give a 5-star review so more people can lift bigger weights and get bigger bank accounts.